The more you fight, the more you feed the ego. Not because resistance is bad in a moral sense, but because resistance is attention, and attention is nourishment. The ego is a very curious creature. It is a knot in the stream of experience formed by the very effort to hold the stream. You think you must push back against fear, correct your flaws, conquer your thoughts, and clutch at some grand image of the person you ought to be. Yet every push hardens the very outline you are trying to soften. Every time you tense your fist around yourself, the outline of the fist grows brighter, and the knuckles become the center of the world. The harder you try to be pure, the more thoroughly you define yourself as impure. The more desperately you try to be calm, the more you insist there is a storm. And so you turn to struggle as if it were wisdom, as if you could grind your way into grace. But grace is the very thing that comes when grinding stops. If I speak plainly, it is to say this: you are not a problem to be solved. You are a pattern to be seen. You are a rhythm of the universe learning to listen to itself. The ego is a contraction, a cramp in the mind, created by the habit of looking for myself as a separate controller of life. When you fight the ego, you hand it the sword. You tell it, "Here, you be the warrior who wins the day." It swells with the drama of the battle, because the ego's favorite food is the story of me versus world. Even defeat is delicious if it keeps the story running. The paradox is that control masquerades as growth, while growth is what unfolds when control relaxes its grip. Let me invite you to see the ego not as an enemy, but as a posture, like holding your breath underwater, insisting you are the sea's master. The effort burns, the lungs ache, and you call this power. But the ocean does not need dominion to move. The wave is not a separate effort from the sea. It is the sea in one of its gestures. When you mistake the gesture for a general, you begin to argue with the water. You try to straighten waves with a ruler, polish the moon out of the tide, train the wind to speak only your name. It is charming, this theater of seriousness, and tragic only when you forget it's a play. If you must begin anywhere, begin here. Stop trying to stop. No, do not try to stop. Simply notice the trying. Listen to the hum of effort in your chest, the inner commentary that measures and judges and announces how well you are doing. That hum is the music of the ego's kitchen, pots clanging with self-importance, recipes for salvation simmering on every burner. When you lean closer to scold the cook, you give the kitchen your energy. Instead, turn toward the quiet room beyond the clatter, where there is nothing to fix, yet everything is allowed to change. This is not passivity. It is intimacy with what is. It is the discovery that attention without grasping is like sunlight. It does not argue the flower into blooming, and yet everything grows in its presence. And so we enter the matter more deeply. Consider the ego as a mask, beautiful, expressive, necessary for the dance of society. It allows you to play your part. The friend, the parent, the lover, the artist, the worker who remembers the code to the door and the polite word to the stranger. But the trouble begins when the mask clings to your face and whispers, "I am you. You are only this." Suddenly the theater of life turns into a courtroom, and you are always on trial. Every speech is a defense, every silence a confession, every gesture a piece of evidence. You ask, "Am I good enough? Have I proved my worth?" The gavel never falls. The trial costs everything and decides nothing. What if you stepped off the witness stand? What if the judge, the accused, and the jury were all cost? Fumes hanging in the same wardrobe? When you fight to defend a fixed identity, you lose the living. When you let yourself be the living, identity becomes a garment you can wear lightly and set aside when it's time to sleep. You don't defeat the ego, you see through it. You don't conquer the mind, you understand its game, and with a smile you stop betting your life on its odds. The mind loves opposition because opposition is clear. Me versus you, right versus wrong, this versus that. Lines are drawn, banners are raised, and the blood is high with purpose. But the deeper truth is not a line, it is a field. In this field your thoughts rise like birds from the grass and settle again without fences. In this field, fear is a weather pattern, not a prophecy. In this field, the self is discovered not as a commander, but as a spaciousness that contains the commander, the soldier, and the field of war. To taste this spaciousness is to relax the hand that clutches after control. You find a breath you don't have to take, a heart that beats without your permission, a life that lives you. Let us walk further into this field and see how the paradox ripens. The more you fight, the more you feed the ego. The more you see, the more it dissolves. Seeing is not the same as watching from a distance. Seeing is intimacy, feeling the pulse of your own fear and letting it tremble without making it an enemy. Seeing is the art of allowing the moment to be as it is, and in that allowance the false solidities crumble. What remains is not a blank, not a void of resignation, but a vibrancy that has been here all along, waiting for you to notice that you are not separate from it. Let me offer you an image. A cat crouched by a mirror, puffed up and arched, convinced that the reflection is a rival. It hisses, swats the glass, and then circles to find the intruder's flank. The mirror, being innocent, offers exactly what the cat brings. The seer. Ziti, being convinced, does not see innocence. It sees threat. The ego behaves in precisely this way with thought and feeling. If a thought comes that says, "You may fail," the ego answers, "I shall not fail," and then erects a battlement to guard against the possibility. Now work becomes a fortress, and love a surveillance tower. Attention is conscripted, tenderness is drafted, and the cat is exhausted from fighting a reflection that cannot bleed. What does it mean to turn away from this mirror war? Not to avert the eyes, but to recognize the glass. A thought is only a thought. A feeling is only a feeling. They rise, they vanish, they return in new costumes. The ego takes these weather patterns and calls them climate, eternal, binding, absolutely who you are. But your identity is not the gust. It is the sky within which the gust blows. The sky does not resist the wind. It is not threatened by a storm. The most powerful feature of the sky is its availability, its endless room. In such room, the need to fight seems absurd, like trying to staple a cloud to a mountain. Another image, a child building a sandcastle at the edge of the tide. Proud, focused, magnificent, the castle rises with towers and gates. The moat is perfect. The tide approaches. The child screams at the sea, defends the walls, cups water in frantic hands to keep the moat from filling. The sea is amused. The sea was always coming and was never against the child. What if we learned to build with the tide? Not to surrender our creativity, but to add dancing to our building. Make towers that celebrate collapse, moats that welcome filling, arches that laugh as they melt. Then your work becomes the sea's own gesture, and you are no longer a frightened engineer, but a child who understands play. Ego thrives on future and past because those are the regions where it can be the hero. In the past, it is the judge who revises the record to prove how right we were. In the future, it is the strategist who will finally perfect the plan. In the present, however, there is no room for a hero, only for participation. The ego cannot participate. It can only narrate. So it resists the present because the present refuses to be narrated. The present is not tidy. It spills. It changes shape as you look at it. And yet, it is precisely this spilling that frees you from the iron grip of your own monologue. Consider your breath. You do not draw it in by effort as if cranking a winch. You do not force it out as if squeezing a bellows. The breath breathes itself, and you cooperate by noticing. When you fight your experience, you interrupt this cooperation. You hold the breath, you clutch the thought, you brace the belly, and you call this trying to be mindful. Mindfulness that is forced is merely the ego's latest fashion. True attention is affectionate. It is not a project. It is a friendship with the moment. A friend does not fix you. A friend sits with you as you are. And in such company, change arrives without a trumpet. One of the greatest illusions of the ego is that fear can be managed through more control. Fear is allergic to control. It swells in its presence. The more you tense against fear, the more the body learns that fear is dangerous, and the cycle deepens. But fear, when met as a sensation, is simply the body contracting around uncertainty. Uncertainty is not an enemy. It is the doorway for life to arrive. If you knew exactly what would happen next, you would be a machine, not a mystery. And you are not a machine. You are a mystery walking. Look also at anger. Anger arises as heat, as expansion, as a protest of thwarted life. When you fight anger, you heat the pot with the lid on. Pressure builds, steam screams for release. When you indulge anger, you pour the pot on the floor, scald and regret. There is a third way, not managing, not indulging, but feeling. Feel anger as a rhythm in the body, a drum beat without a war. Let it sound, and listen to its message. Something you love is being blocked. The ego wants a villain to hate. The heart wants a path to open. When you attend to the path, the villain shrinks to a mistaken signpost. Think of desire. Desire is a wind that enters the house through every window. You may board up the frames and boast of your ascetic discipline, only to find the wind singing through the chimney. You may throw every window open and let the wind hurl the furniture about, or you may learn what a house is for, to host the wind and be still. Desire is the vitality of life seeking its play. When you fight desire, you feed the ego's pride. When you fuse with desire, you feed the ego's hunger. When you welcome desire without becoming its servant, the wind becomes music and the house becomes a home. This willingness to welcome does not make you weak. On the contrary, it makes you available to intelligence deeper than strategy. A dancer is powerful not because she stiffens, but because she yields and directs. She uses gravity as an ally. Likewise, when you stop fighting yourself, your energy returns to the whole of you, no longer partitioned into battles, but expressed as presence. Presence makes action accurate. It lets you say yes when yes is true, and no when no is true, without the panic of self-defense. You begin to act as the situation acts through you. It is effortless, not because nothing happens, but because there is no remainder, no internal quarrel shadowing every move. How shall we live this understanding in the marketplace, at the kitchen sink, under the fluorescent lights of the office, and in the tender confusions of love? Let us bring it down from the clouds and into your very next breath. When you wake, do not try to manufacture a perfect morning. Feel the body waking you, before the mind reaches for its armor and team. Notice the contact of sheet on skin, the whisper of air in the nostrils, the slow tally of sounds. Let this be your first honesty. I am already moving within a living world that does not need my permission to exist. In that recognition, set a simple intention, not to fix yourself today, but to participate. Participation is not passivity. Participation is skillful friendliness. As you brush your teeth, as you step into the street, keep returning to the question, what is here, and how can I meet it without a fist? This question is a key that opens moments that otherwise become hallways of stress. In conversation, try this. Instead of rehearsing your next line while the other speaks, dwell in the texture of their voice, the pauses, the small betrayals of courage and uncertainty. The ego listens for ammunition or applause. Presence listens for contact. When you feel the tug to defend your image, soften the belly. It is very hard to lie with a soft belly. The body tells the truth before the mouth does. If you soften there, you may discover that the clever reply you were about to deliver is not required. A simple acknowledgement is. Sometimes the most intelligent act is to let someone's words land without arranging them into a verdict. Work offers glorious opportunities for the ego to overfeed. Goals and deadlines and reputations are the ego's buffet table. You can bring a different appetite. Begin your tasks by clarifying the real function. What is the service here? Not the service to your image, but to the process, to the people, to the craft itself. If you enter your task as a contribution rather than a performance, your attention spreads. You become porous to the intelligence of the work. Mistakes become feedback rather than disgrace. And paradoxically, excellence rises because the hands are free to feel. In relationships, the ego often dresses as the rescuer or the victim. Both costumes are hungry. The rescuer needs someone to save. The victim needs someone to blame. Drop the costumes. They itch. Meet your beloved not as a project nor as a battle. Field, but as a landscape in which you are invited to walk, with curiosity, with respect. Love is not an achievement. It is a climate two people co-create by paying attention. Speak to each other about how the weather feels today rather than about who is at fault for the clouds. Then action, when needed, arises not from punishment but from care. You may ask, but what of boundaries? They are essential, and they become clearer when they are not weapons. A boundary is simply accurate shape. Consider a cup. Its boundary allows it to hold water. It doesn't despise the sea for not fitting inside. When you set a boundary without the ego's courtroom, you are not saying, I am better than this, but this is the shape in which I can truly give. Boundaries drawn from presence are surprisingly calm. They do not demand drama to be respected. They are spoken once and lived consistently. Let's bring this into the body. Throughout the day, practice the smallest possible stopping. Not a grand ritual, just 5 seconds of unbecoming. Feel the jaw. Let it unhook. Feel the shoulders rise with an in-breath and drop as if they were hanging on pegs. Place the attention in the soles of the feet. The mind will announce, too simple, we need strategies. Thank the mind for its enthusiasm and return to the soles. From there, re-enter whatever you are doing. You will notice that the world fits better when you are not squeezing it. When pain arrives, emotional or physical, refuse the 2 standard contracts, stoic denial and melodrama. Instead, sign the 3rd contract, cooperation. Ask the pain where it lives, how it moves, whether it is hot or cold, tight or diffuse. Place your breath into that region as if you could open a window there. You are not promising to enjoy the pain. You are promising not to exile yourself from your own body. Exile feeds the ego because it multiplies stories. Coop. Erasure starves the ego because it reduces the need for narrative. And in the simpler air, healing begins its quiet labor. As for habits that seem to own you, rather than declaring war, become a naturalist of your own life. Keep a gentle field journal. Note when the habit loves to appear, what time of day, what state of body, what weather of mood. Note what it promises and what it delivers. Such observation is not scolding, it is science in the service of compassion. You will find that habits require certain conditions to thrive. Without those conditions, they become shy. Do not try to uproot the forest, change the light, the water, the soil of your days, rearrange the furniture of your attention, and the creatures of habit will find new homes. Finally, cultivate uselessness. Take 10 minutes to do something that cannot be monetized, justified, or admired. Watch the shadows move up a wall, feel the texture of an orange before you eat it, count the breaths it takes for a kettle to sing. Uselessness is balm because it drains the ego's economy. In such unproductive time, you remember that existence is not a business, it is a festival. You did not come here to win the fair. You came to be the music. Now, let us step even more quietly into the sanctuary where transformation happens without fanfare. Self-awareness is not a trophy. It is a lamp carried into a familiar room at night. The furniture was always there. The lamp simply reveals it, and in the warm light you stop stubbing your toe. This lamp, call it attention or presence, does not accuse. It does not ask you to be different first. It is not the spotlight of a stage demanding a flawless performance. It is the light of home saying, you belong. When you feel that belonging, the ego's urgency softens. It sees that it is not the guardian of a fragile world, but a tool in a vast one, a clever secretary who can organize but must not be allowed to run the company. Letting go of the ego is therefore not an execution. It is a reorganization. You put the secretary back at the desk and invite the deeper intelligence, the one that breathes the trees, arranges the seasons, and beats the heart, to take the chair by the window. This intelligence is not other than you. It is the widest version of you. It does not speak in slogans. It speaks in the feel of rightness that needs no defense, the clarity that arrives like a bell in clean air, the compassion that acts before the book of rules can be consulted. In this clarity, freedom is not the power to get what you want. It is the ease of wanting what arises to be wanted through you. This is not resignation. It is not the apathy of whatever. It is the vividness of this, felt fully, answered wholly, and then released. Life becomes a series of sincere gestures, each complete, none hoarded. You discover that meaning is not a trophy on a shelf, but the taste of the fruit while you are eating it. Spiritual freedom is not a state you lock in. It is a way of moving that remains fresh because it is not trying to be anything else. You may wonder about purpose. The ego wants a mission statement carved in stone. Presence writes in water, but water carves the canyon. Let your purpose be this: to cooperate with the great happening, to let the intelligence that grows forests also compose your next sentence, guide your next step, open your next hand. If a vision comes, let it come. If it leaves, bow as it goes. What continues is the trust that you and the world are not adversaries, but facets of one gleaming event. In such trust, your actions acquire a gracious precision. You say what is true because anything else tastes wrong. You give what you can because generosity fits like your own skin. You withdraw when it is time because clinging feels like a costume a size too small. As this ripens, peace is not a plateau beyond weather. It is the capacity to be the weather without becoming lost in any one clothes. Wood joy is not giddiness. It is the quiet affection for existing at all. Love is not possession. It is the recognition that everything you touch is yourself in another form, meeting itself for the 1,000th first time. Sorrow is not a punishment. It is the river of love running where love has been touched. Even death, that old teacher, is not the end of life so much as life turning the page. Let us end as we began, by refusing the war. The more you fight, the more you feed the ego, not because you should never act, but because action without hostility is cleaner and more accurate than any crusade against yourself. When you act from presence, the action contains its own conclusion. It does not demand applause, and it does not seek an enemy to justify itself. It is like a bell struck once at dusk, clear, sufficient, then gone, leaving the evening deeper. Sit with me for a moment now, not to accomplish anything, but to glow quietly with what you are. Let your attention rest in the breath, as if it were the tide touching and leaving the shore. Feel the body you have borrowed from the stars, the bones that were once stone, the blood that was once rain. Let the mind do whatever it does, count birds, plan dinners, revisit a hurt, and place a hand inwardly upon its shoulder. Thank you, you say to the clamor, for trying to keep me safe. Then let the hand fall open. Notice the room you're in, the hum, the light, the faint scent of the day. Notice the space in which the room appears, the same space that holds your thoughts, your breath, the memory of a face you love, the ache in your chest that is also a form of love, all of it included, nothing exiled. Ask if you like, not as a puzzle, but as a doorway, who is aware? Do not strive to answer. Let the question bloom and reveal that awareness is not a thing you own, but the field in which owning appears. Notice how in that field you cannot actually find a single edge where you end and the world begins. There are only edges of function, like the lip of a cup, helpful for pouring, but not the truth of water. Allow this to be enough, that you are water learning again how to pour. And as you rise from this listening, carry a simple remembrance into the next ordinary moment. Soften the belly, feel the soles, keep the hand open. The day will still be the day, emails and traffic, laughter and dishes, but it will be bathed in a light you did not have to build. You are the field, not the line. You are the sky, not the gust. You are the sea dancing as a wave for a while, and you do not need to fight your way back to the sea. You have never left.